The pie that changed everything. The hot summer air shimmered over the gravel road as Ellie Moore pressed her brakes gently near the wooden gate of her parents' farm. A pie still warm rested on the passenger seat, a recipe passed down through generations. She had woken at 4 a.m. to bake it just like Grandma Nora used to, from scratch, with cinnamon-dusted apples and a heart-shaped crust. It was Father's Day, and her dad had just survived triple bypass surgery. She came every Sunday without fail, 4 hours from her job in pediatric development at a hospital in Cincinnati. But this Sunday would be different. Blocking the driveway was a sleek luxury SUV, and standing beside, it was a woman in a tailored navy blazer, Camille Brighton, the president of the Countryside Preserve HOA. Camille lifted her sunglasses and pointed at Ellie. "Your pie isn't welcome here today. It's Sunday. No outside visitors allowed." Huazoulet. From the kitchen window, Martha Moore froze mid-slice of a tomato. Her husband, Jack, sat quietly, rubbing his knees, still stiff from surgery. Martha had seen that look before, back when she uncovered a $14 million tax fraud for the IRS. Her jaw tightened. "They picked the wrong family to separate," she muttered, reaching for her financial forensics notebook. 15 years earlier, Jack and Martha had bought this 20-acre plot, a quiet retirement after 42 years building bridges and uncovering financial deceit. Together, they restored the farmhouse, cultivated a garden, and created a home for their daughter Ellie to return to, a home of Sunday pot roasts, porch swings, and laughter. Countryside Preserve had once promised rural charm with modern unity. But when Camille Brighton, a former corporate real estate mogul with Senate ambitions, rose to power, things changed. Under her watch, the HOA enacted increasingly rigid regulations under the guise of community preservation. It began with visitor pre-approvals, then escalated into the Sunday Serenity Rule. No visitors on Sundays, effective immediately. The vote, held on a Tuesday morning, buried in a 16-page newsletter. Few noticed until it was too late. On this Father's Day, Camille enforced it with chilling precision. "I'm sorry," Ellie said, her voice trembling, "but this is my father. He just had heart surgery." Camille's reply was icy. "Rules are rules. Exceptions invite chaos." Ellie's eyes welled up. "Please, it's a pie. It's Father's Day." Camille folded her arms. "Then celebrate on Monday." That night, as the sun dipped behind the fields, Jack sat in the barn's loft. Across the road, Camille's home bustled with laughter, music, and out-of-state guests. Her party, 8 cars, gourmet food, and no HOA interference. The hypocrisy was glaring. Jack and Martha attended the next HOA meeting, held in a converted barn. Jack stood before the crowd. "My daughter was turned away on Father's Day because of these rules. Yet our president entertained a dozen guests. What kind of community are we becoming?" Camille gave a corporate smile. "These measures have increased property value by 12%. We must protect the neighborhood's peace." But others began to speak. A beekeeper whose grandchildren missed a planned fishing day, a widow whose sister was turned away, a veteran firefighter whose family faced threats of fines. Martha listened, eyes sharp. She whispered to Jack, "It's time to follow the money." Martha dug deep. She filed for records. She found inconsistencies. Landscaping costs inflated 340%, itemized administrative fees ballooned to $78,000, and road repair bills jumped from $45,000 to $137,000 with no specifics. Jack watched as his wife transformed back into the feared auditor. She mapped connections between vendor addresses and HOA board members. She contacted David Chun, a trusted former colleague at the IRS. Together, they unearthed shell companies' identical invoice errors and strategic appointment timelines. A cease and desist letter arrived, signed by a prestigious law firm. Then came a threatening note with no signature. Neighbors who had once supported them became distant. Fear had replaced fellowship. Still, Martha pressed on. She discovered Camille's vacation home purchase aligned with a $137,000 transfer labeled Rural Security Infrastructure. The contractor? A shell company tied to Camille's brother-in-law. Surveillance cameras pointed at the Moores' property. Camille called them wildlife monitors. Through a student hired for weekend road monitoring, Martha discovered service provider exemptions, secret codes that allowed Camille's friends to bypass Sunday rules. Logs showed fake landscape visits with casserole dishes. Martha compiled the evidence. Over $127,000 diverted in 3 years. Premium upgrades on board members' homes disguised as community projects. Meanwhile, services were slashed, dues increased, and neighbor trust shattered. She built a coalition: widows, veterans, retired engineers, all fed up. Frank Donovan, a former project manager, confirmed contractor quotes were inflated by over 60%. Harriet Jameson, a former board secretary, revealed Camille had threatened to question her driving competence when she raised concerns. With support from Janet Kwan at the State Attorney General's office, Martha submitted a formal dossier. A secret investigation began. Then they invoked Bylaw 12.4, the right to demand a financial transparency review. The barn overflowed that Saturday. Camille arrived, flanked by loyalists, but was visibly tense. "This meeting is unauthorized," she began. Martha calmly stood. 42% of residents signed. That's well above the 10% required. She distributed folders, clear, concise, irrefutable. Gasps rippled through the crowd as neighbors saw the truth. Camille fumbled. "This is defamation." Martha answered, "Truth is a defense. The Attorney General has the dossier." One by one, neighbors stood. Eleanor Wilson, Frank, Miguel Alvarez. They all spoke, some trembling, some outraged, but all united. Within a month, Camille and 3 board members faced charges of embezzlement, fraud, and intimidation. The following Sunday, Ellie arrived again, pie in hand. No guards, no barriers, just open fields, sunlight on the gravel, and her parents waiting on the porch. Jack took the pie, tears in his eyes. "Welcome home, sweetheart." Some victories aren't about lawsuits or headlines. They're about regaining the right to share a Sunday pie with family, and remembering that even in retirement, you can still build bridges of truth, of justice, and of love.